So this is a block, and it's made of wood. And this is a block, and it's made of some sort of composite material with a rigid back on it. And then this is a block, and it is made from this composite cork-like material. It's kind of much more flexible. And I don't have a block carved out of this, but this is linoleum. You ever heard of a linoleum floor? Well, that's what this material is, like a linoleum floor tile. So that should give you an idea of just the different types of substrates that can be used to carve. And of course there's lots of different types of substrates that I don't even have here. These are just a few. Wood is one of your oldest, historically, it's one of your oldest substrates that's been used in societies. And the Chinese were experts at carving blocks of wood. And this carving came from India. I ordered it, I think I ordered it off Etsy or something. But you can see that this is very hard wood. This is not as hard, and then this is somewhat soft. And you can tell the reactions of your lines. You can see what happens, can't you? Really hard, what do you get? Line work. What kind of line work do you get? Yeah, real fine line work. Substrate gets a little softer. What happens? Line work not as thin, right? Not as detailed, right? So the harder your substrate, this is an ink, one of these soft blocks that was carved by a student a couple of years ago. And what do you notice? What was she able to do? These prints didn't pull as well. Yeah, multiples. You're able to duplicate your work. So you carve it once, you ink it, and then you get several prints out of it. And you can see she's come down here and she's actually numbered her prints. She pulled 5 total. This is 4 of 5 and 5 of 5, 2 of 5. You can see as she continued to pull, the impression got better. And then she signs them and she gave the print a name. And she actually carved this after another artist. But what do you notice about her print and her ink block, her carved ink block? But if you notice, they're mirror images of each other. So whatever you carve is going to be reversed when you print it. So that's really important to note, because every semester I have students that carve words and then they pull the print and their words are backwards. So just keep that in mind. Right here is called your cutter. And you can see it's a handle with a ball on the end of it. And there's a reason for that. And then you've got this nut right here that turns and loosens up this little ball on the inside here. And when you do that, it's going to open up a little slot, and this is your handle, this is your cutter. And this cutter has a rounded side which goes down in that slot, and then it's got a very sharp side that's what you cut with. And I'll send this around. Let me get this back in here so you can look at it. I always have trouble because it's so small and I can't see very well without my glasses on. Okay, but it will slide down in there, and then you can cinch that nut back up, and then it's ready to begin cutting. So let me get a couple of these. Hold them. Here's you a cutter. Okay, and if you notice, this bottom of your handle will open up, and here are additional blades. And each of these blades is designed a little differently. They're going to cut a different type of line into your substrate. Either a really, really thin line or a real wide line. And you can also look at the end of those cutters and see that some of those cutters are going to gouge more deeply into your substrate, whereas some are going to stay on the surface. And these different types of cutting blades are going to give you different types of lines. So they're going to allow you to create variety in your work. And then you have this kind of knife that's shaped kind of like a leaf. And that will allow you to cut out between larger areas. You can slice like straight and then come in and then just cut out larger areas of your substrate. Because see, if this student didn't use this type of blade, and so there's a lot of line work down inside there. Maybe they wanted that, I don't know. Okay, return to our cutters. We've got our different blades there. So why don't y'all practice with taking the blade out that you have in your cutter, in your handle, and putting a new one in, changing that blade out, just to kind of see how that works. And if you have trouble doing it, maybe just kind of give it a little bit of wiggle. But some of these are student grade cutters. They weren't very expensive, and so some of them don't cooperate as well as they should. And that is an example of a cutter that's not all the way down in there. You want the shank of that cutter to go pretty far down into that nut, and then because you don't want that blade flipping back on you as you begin to bear down and cut with it. There's an example of a blade that's in there really, really good. And then once you get the blade in there, if you don't have the cap on your handle, go ahead and put the cap back on. And there's a way that you hold this cutter. If you are cutting a big piece and it's taking you a long time, you want to be sure that you're holding the cutter correctly, because you can hurt your hand and just really wear your hand out really fast. So what you want to do when you're holding the cutter is you want to hold your palm out like this, and you want to place that ball right there around in the palm of your hand between your index finger and your thumb, and grasp around it. And then you want your index finger kind of running down through there so that you can control your cutter and your thumb on the other side. And then you're going to allow the cutter to do the work. If you find yourself doing like this, you're not doing it right. You instead want to just watch that material just curl up underneath the cutter. And so you're pushing your hand into the ball, but you're allowing that cutter to work. And as you see, my left hand isn't here, it's over here, because this is going to hurt like poopy doopy, okay? It's going to mean you're going to have to go to the nurse. So you're going to keep that left hand over here, holding the substrate down. And there are even tabletop cutters. Tramil, will you hand me that right here? Of a board that you can use. You see it's got a little cleat on the back here, and you put that on the edge of the table, and then you put your work right here, And that's gonna make it really safe for you to cut and easier too. So you see how that works? Got it? You try it. Now, we're playing around with the linoleum, but this composite material, this quick cut stuff, is gonna feel a lot different, and it's actually a little easier to cut. So Tremel, I'm gonna say you found an image that you wish to carve into your substrate, into your block. What you're going to do is you can print the image out, or if you've drawn it, it's here on a sheet of paper. You flip it over on the back, and you can use charcoal or Conte crayon, or you can even use graphite, heavy graphite. But what you're going to do is you're going to cover the back of that drawing with some sort of dry pigment. Can you see where I'm going with this? Then, when you get ready to transfer it onto your substrate, you simply flip it back over, line it up, and use something like a stylus. I'm just going to use a pencil here and trace over your lines that you want, whatever it is that you want to cut, and it'll transfer. Do you see that, Tremel? Do you see how I did that? You just trace this, and then you can come in here. Oops, I'm not using it right, am I? And you just cut those lines. All right. Everything you cut away every bit of material that you remove from your substrate, from your block, will be white, the color of the paper. So we tend to think about when we're drawing, you know, we want to color in an area to make it the foreground, but it's going to be the opposite in ink block printing. So you got to reverse your brain in this. This is why we do this project every semester, because it's just a completely different way of forcing your brain to create an image. So it's going to be in reverse. It's what's called reverse. So everything that's dark will be white, and everything that's white will be dark. And it'll make even more sense when I ink a plate and we pull a print, which we're going to do today. Now the next step in ink block printing is to ink your plate. And the first thing you're going to do is you're going to prepare your ink on a sheet of glass. And I have several of these sheets of smoked glass that we can use. And the reason we have several is because we have different colors of ink. We've got black, we've got pewter, I love the pewter. We've got blue, some more pewter, we got red, and then we got this big old tub of black right here. And you can even mix colors if you want. But today I'm just going to start with black. And remember, you've got your little spatula to use. But the first thing I'm going to do is kind of get this ink mixed up. And this is, and so I'm going to just take and I'm just going to put a blobble. I've always wondered what that's called. It's called a blobble. I'm going to put a blobble out on the glass like this. And that's enough just for this one example. And I've got a couple of different types of brayers. These are called brayers, and they're used for spreading the ink. This is a very hard brayer. This is just a rubber roller on here. And this is a soft brayer. And according to the substrate, if you've got a really hard or dense substrate, you can use a dense and a hard brayer. But when you've got this softer stuff like this composite stuff, you want to use a softer brayer because that'll push that ink on down into that plate. Whereas you don't have to push as hard with the harder substrate. So what you're going to do, I can use a hard brayer on this, is once you get that ink on the glass, your next job is to get the ink evenly coating that rubber wheel on the brayer. So you don't do this. You go up and you pick up, and you come back and you lift. Up and lift, back and lift, up and lift, back and lift. And you can see right now that the ink is real streaky, but what you're going for is a graininess to the ink. And I'll show you in a second after I've been rolling it. So what you're working on the consistency of that ink, and you don't want to roll it all over the glass. You want to keep it in a little rectangular area, just like what I have. It's kind of fun doing this too. It's very visceral. But by lifting the brayer up and pushing it back down, you're making sure that you evenly coat that brayer. Now I'm going to coat my block. And one of the things I don't want to happen is I don't want a bunch of ink to get down in those grooves. Instead, I want that ink to sit up on top of the cuts. And I can tell it's not going to do that. Got too much ink on my brayer. Now, that's what you're going for right there. See that? Go down in those grooves. And then you begin to coat your block. In ink block printing, this wooden block is designed so that I can hold it with my hand like this and print. So I can come over here, and if I were actually using this for the purpose it was intended for, I would probably print on cloth. I'd have a big sheet of cloth put out in front of me, and I would go bam, bam, and I would print a pattern on the cloth. Print. Instead of stamping, your block is on the bottom. I think I'm going to use this one. Your block is on the bottom, and you ink your block. And if I had a setup, I'd have a little rig that would hold this. I'm gonna make sure that you got all of that covered. But you once again, you don't want to fill in anything. And I'm going to switch over to this soft brayer because it's going to let me fill in all of those little glitchy areas in there. You can hear it already, the difference, can't you?
Yeah.
Yep. Come in here and I'm trying to fill in as good as I can. Okay, I've probably got that block inked up pretty good. So I'm going to lay a piece of scrap paper down underneath it because I don't want this to get on my paper. And you want to line it up on the paper, and then you want to come in, lay. This is going to be the paper that hosts your image. So you want to make sure there's nothing around you. A lot of times people will clean themselves up before they start pulling prints because they've got ink all over them. But you want to format it. You want to line your sheet up like so, like that. And then use your hand to hold it down. And then you're going to use a burnisher like this. You're going to hold it with your left hand or your right hand, depending on which hand you are. And then you're just going to begin to burnish. And that's going to help push that paper down into that substrate. And it's going to grab all the ink that it can grab. You want to be sure to get your edges. And then you pull your print. You literally pull it. Just like that. So, printmaking is an art form. There's a lot of craftsmanship involved in it. The process is very time-honored. Can you create a print with more than one color of ink?
Yes.
Of course you can, all right? Sometimes these woodblock prints that are carved by Japanese artists may contain up to 16 different colors. So the medium allows a diversity of expression. And the cool thing about it is that you can duplicate what you're doing. But even in the process of duplicating, we can see that no two prints are identical. So you number your prints. So what I might do on this one is I would come in here and I would sign my name, and I'd decide ahead of time how many prints am I going to pull. And so I pulled 3, so this was the second one we printed, right? So 2 out of 3, and I might put my name and also the title of the work. Yeah. So it's almost, even though it's a reproduction, it's almost like an original, isn't it? Because it's got the unique hand of the maker on it, you know? Johnny Angel pulled the print. Maybe Javid carved it a couple of semesters ago, but Johnny Angel's come back and she's printed the job. And so you can see how there could be a number of people involved in the pulling of especially more complex prints.